I'm Mike Lowndes. I'm part of the Commerce Technologies and Experience team at Gartner. I'd like to thank Commerce Tools for inviting me to participate in this event. I'm going to talk today about why digital commerce, and in fact all digital experiences in the future, will be built in a composable fashion, and why commerce is at the forefront of what Gartner is calling composable business. Essentially, this talk is about how we get from the left side of this slide to the right, and why we should. It's unashamedly about the present and future of high-level architecture for digital commerce and related digital experiences. I hope it'll show why that's important for IT and for digital business leaders alike. It's also important to say that we're not there yet, that we're just at the beginning of the journey towards composable business and the composable future. However, because digital commerce is such a competitive space, we as a market are early adopters of this new paradigm. So firstly, why digital commerce? Why not e-commerce? What's wrong with that? Well, e-commerce speaks to the era of the website. Mobile first, then added the smartphone, but I think we're beyond that now. Digital commerce speaks to all digital channels in a multi-experience world. And today, this is blurring into the physical realm as well. So here's the agenda today. We're going to start with the business context and drivers for change. We're going to have a little bit of a history lesson on the commerce platform evolution, then talk a little bit about Gartner's future of applications research and how it applies to digital commerce to form composable commerce. And finally, I'm going to ask the question, are you ready for this? So, context, the current IT megatrends, not just in digital commerce or experience, but across the whole estate. We're seeing the shift from software to SaaS, from ownership to rental, from customization to extension, all of these for good business reasons. We're seeing the rise of cloud native. Almost nobody wants on-premises anymore, or to be on premises unless there are specific regulatory or security reasons why you should. Front-end revolution. The full-stack platform agility is questioned. Headless is becoming pervasive across all digital experience implementations. And finally, agility. It really comes back to business agility. Traditional approaches can't scale to the proliferation of touch points we're seeing today. Customers expect seamless continuity across all channels, and businesses find themselves limited by the multi-experience capabilities of their current platforms. Furthermore, digital strategy itself is changing. We're seeing a shift to digital product management, the rise of the fusion teams, agile methodologies becoming mainstream, and DevOps. We're seeing that e-commerce web shops themselves are no longer differentiating. Content and commerce have been converging for years, and really they have by now. Customer experience itself across the whole of this area is the new battleground. And right now, it's not about buy or build really today, but buy and build. And I hope you'll see by the end of this, compose. And Gartner has been talking about these shifts for some time now. We started talking about our vision of commerce to you in 2018. And part of that view was the idea that you need flexible and modular assets in order to achieve that vision. And that idea in 2018 has really accelerated incredibly over the last few years. We'd say, if anything, it's on steroids today, especially post-pandemic. We're accelerating towards this view. And of course, the global pandemic can't be ignored. These are our 10 main outcomes. What we think are the longer term impacts of the global pandemic. And they see, and really just simplifying it, there is at the front end, it's really about that blurring between the physical and the digital, and the need to become truly multi-experience. We're also seeing a shift in B2B, away from sales driven to self-service with sales assist. And at the back end, again, modular architectures and configurable business experiences are also really required to survive the changes ahead, as well as in our recent past. So organizationally, the demand is for business agility, which is increased interest in modular architectures and not just from IT. And post-pandemic, we see strategic imperatives changing, business resiliency becoming very, very important. And that's strategic and from an innovation perspective, that you need to innovate to survive. That itself will lead to composable business. That will lead to the need for composable business applications, which will lead to, of course, for us having to compose those applications instead of simply buy them or build them. Okay, we could take a little bit of a step back now before we jump into composability itself, into the evolution of how we got to where we are. Essentially, about 8 years ago, we saw customers ripping the head from their incumbent monolithic platforms, building APIs themselves and putting them under DXPs, digital experience platforms, or web content management systems. And this was to make the business user, the marketer, have a much more pleasant experience in managing that digital experience than was available in most of the platforms of that time. Of course, the vendors started to create their own APIs, and headless commerce became a thing. However, that approach didn't really improve agility, because although it did improve the business user usage, because essentially you now have two monoliths, one at the front end and one at the back end. So more recently, we saw with the maturation of front-end frameworks, of single-page applications, progressive web apps, and decoupled front ends in general, that instead of that approach, the new one of API-oriented or modular API first has become much more popular. The revolution at that front end has meant a light front end with fast innovation, and digital commerce essentially now becomes one of a set of APIs that you need to construct an experience. And so if we explode that final diagram a little bit, you see this, and this is a modular approach to commerce essentially. Instead of buying all of your commerce capabilities from a single vendor, what we're seeing much more today with our digitally mature clients is that they will start to bring together point solutions or best of breed providers in a set of areas. And you can see here I've selected content, search, identity authentication, commerce, service and returns, but of course there are many more. Those are just examples. And it's also important to note that in this context, everything can be a cloud service. There's nothing needed to be on-prem. You don't really need to host software at all to get here. The only possible exception to that being presentation itself. The touch point often needs some very refining, if you like, to get a unique customer experience. The idea, though, is that businesses become able to choose to buy and integrate best-of-breed capabilities to compose experiences instead of just accepting what they're given by a single vendor. In digital commerce, this is now emerging into mainstream thinking. And this emerging modular approach has movements like Jamstack and Mac, loose alliances of point solution vendors really taking on the mega vendors and providing a different way of doing things. Experience orchestration itself is starting to be disrupted as well. We're seeing lean DXPs and client-side applications to do that. I'll come on to that a little bit later. Commerce capabilities alongside analytics and content and search are becoming more and more commoditized, which suits software as a service. And the idea being that all of these capabilities should integrate together easily to form part of wider digital experiences. So the idea is that if you take this approach, this modular approach, it will get you to a more modular, more agile approach to digital commerce. And it's the starting step towards composability. And actually, you can take it further, down to the next level. How do you slice and dice that commerce monolith itself? And it's the monolithic nature of the commerce platforms themselves, sometimes bloated with functionality and slow to innovate, that's really encouraged change to occur in the space. And we've seen a new set of vendors enter the space providing modular commerce platforms, which takes that and deconstructs that monolith into the beginnings of what we call packaged business capabilities. And taking this approach is also good for the vendors, especially SaaS vendors, because it allows the vendors to be more agile, to release much more frequently, and enables agility on their side too. So if we look at the difference here, on the left, you have what we call headless commerce, but it's still a monolith. And on the right, modular API-first commerce, which enables you really to provide that innovation layer and get moving quicker. And we're not even sure it's going to end there. You might think that, hey, there's a core of commerce around the catalog, around content, around the checkout, which really should come from the same vendor. But when you look in the market already, we're seeing solutions which break that up and provide parts of it. from a storefront as a service to promotions as a service to checkout as a service, and of course catalogs. There are vendors appearing with point solutions which provide innovative features in all those capabilities. There's a difficulty here because you really are now having many vendors providing you services, but the challenge is that there's a huge advantage too, and that's business agility and differentiation. So finally, we've made it to the future applications research and composable commerce. So what I've talked about really up to now was the state of the art as I saw it up to about 18 months ago. But meanwhile, the same trends have been observed across the whole of the IT enterprise. And it became Gartner's Future of Applications research on composable business, which I applied to composable commerce, of course. And this is the fundamental statement that we make, our vision, if you like, that the future of applications will enable the composable business based on democratized integration of packaged business capabilities. Instead of buying large monolithic CRM platforms, ERP platforms, HR platforms, or commerce platforms, we'll build them, we'll compose them from modules which will serve a more focused business purpose and can be reused. So what is a PBC, a packaged business capability? Oh, well, this is a picture of one. It's very much like a microservice in many attributes, but without that inferred sizing. It's not a sizist application. The idea that micro is too small for many applications. What these are independently deployable and functionally discrete. They also access via APIs, so they do share a lot of commonality with microservices. And actually, they can be built in a microservices architecture, of course. But fundamentally, they must be understandable by a business user. That's kind of the point. They're a packaged business capability, which is also a discrete piece of IT. And essentially, they're the building blocks of future digital applications and experiences, the Lego blocks, if you like. And this is how we build from them. So on the left there is the packaged business capability. In the middle, that pentagon is an application composed of packaged business capabilities. And those applications an enterprise can have will themselves build into a portfolio of applications and can be reused to deliver different kinds of experiences within that enterprise. And here's an example the example, if you like, in digital commerce of how we would do that. So again, you can see a commerce application, an experience application, and a service application on the left, and capabilities, packaged business capabilities from all of those components, all of those applications composed together to create experiences with the customers on the right. And the blue dots there are the actual UIs. Those are the experiences provided, which hook in to the capabilities required at the back end. So, of course, presentation orchestration and presentation management is key to the success of this approach. But this is where things get interesting. What manages the digital experience? And I don't just mean the customer-facing digital experience, I mean the business-facing digital experience as well. Experiences are for all users, and it's an area where we don't really have mature solutions today. It's the next stage of development of composability. It's usually pro-code still today. We'll see innovation in the future. I think we're seeing the emergence of some things already. Today, your main options are essentially buying a DXP, but okay, again, those are mostly monoliths today, using front end as a service provider and then hooking the DX APIs that you require into them, or looking to multi-experience or low-code application platforms to help you build such a thing. But we're still in the Wild West in this space, and there are still many ways to achieve a solution today, but most of them being pro-code. The idea that really to get to composable business and composed applications, it needs to be no code, or at least very low code. And so what we're going to see is a new class of software, I think, and we're kind of predicting that this will appear, which is an application composition technology. So I've mostly focused on presentation orchestration and presentation composition, but actually composition needs to happen at the back end as well as the front end. And how we do that in the future is yet to really be ascertained. We have the building blocks like webhooks and events and APIs, but we don't have any interoperability mechanisms or common ways to communicate yet. So this new class of technology will help solve the problem. As I say, that our time horizon for that is probably still 5 to 10 years. So composable commerce is not here today. It remains a future ideal, but we're definitely on the way, and you can take steps towards that ideal. Headless, if you like, and platform modularity are the starting points. And what are the business benefits of starting down this track, moving towards composable commerce via the use of packaged business capabilities? Well, increased speed of reaction to the market, adaptation to change and innovation, ability to compose unique customer experiences from the PBCs you have and from the UIs. The IT function of a PBC aligns to business function is key. This is the point of fusion teams as well. So that true alignment between IT and the business. And separation of concern between business initiatives. So you're not all trying to pile in requirements to the same piece of software to get changed across different business units, for instance. So composable commerce will accelerate transformation and help you go live with new business models as well. There are also technical benefits, and the technical benefits are highly aligned with the business benefits, of course. Many benefits of the microservices approach, but with what Gartner would call appropriate granularity of service. Not everything needs to be micro. And so this does away with that sizeism inherent in the term. But it will allow incremental development. It allows you to release more often with less impact. And of course, the architecture, the idea of doing this is inherently pluggable, flexible for optimization or new innovations. And of course, again, the IT function aligns to business function. You have common goals with the business at last. But agility and flexibility like this comes at the cost of complexity. It's not fast. There are more moving parts, so no more technical governance is required. A good level of digital maturity is expected in companies wanting to take this approach. Others will have to rely on vendors or service providers doing the same to get there. And it's not necessarily quicker to market either. Quicker to market initially might take more time using this approach as you build your jigsaw of services. Once you are live, though, then you get the agility, you get the subsequent agility or flexibility to do more faster. And finally, are you ready for this? So this is all about digital maturity. What we have at Gartner is our digital maturity index or score, and we would say that you'd need to be level 3 or minimum to really be ready for taking on composability. And these are some of the characteristics. So thinking about bimodal IT running at the speed of both the business digitally, but also the speed of your systems of record. So running at different speeds depending on the context, using different methodologies. Digital product thinking, product ownership and management, using agile and bringing in fusion teams and similar concepts of working together. And DevOps maturity, either with yourself or a trusted partner, so that you can release more frequently. And finally, now in the new age, cloud and cloud ops and hybrid architecture. So understanding that some of your capability might be still on premise, some of it might be in private cloud, some of it might be in public cloud, but be happy with those hybrid jigsaws and how you manage them. And how to get ready for it. Well, these are the kind of things we'd ask you to do if you really want to push in this direction. So reject the monolith. Look for those more modular API-first solutions. Accelerate product style delivery. Fuse your business teams and IT teams together to get to those fusion teams, which really focus on the same thing and don't have conflicting interests. Realign the application and vendor selection criteria towards PBCs instead of just buying applications. And finally, adopt an incremental approach. So avoiding those failures of big bang approaches that we've seen arising from poor planning in the past. And I'd like to thank you very much for listening to me, and thank you for your time today. And thanks again to Commerce Tools.
Thanks, Mike. That was great.
Thanks, Kelly. Great to be here.
I always loved how Gartner, the role that Gartner fills in our market of translating all this nerd speak that we talk about to actual business value. You're kind of the bridge between the architects and the CFOs and the CEOs. So very much appreciate your role in our market and that translation that you do so well. And I'm also very curious to see how the rise of composable commerce and mock and what that means to this year's Magic Quadrant scoring. So very curious how that's going to turn out here soon.
Yeah, thanks for that.
So we have some questions. We have some questions from the audience, and we've got a whole bunch of them. So let's go a little bit faster here. The first question, and I've heard this from quite a few folks over the years, is how do you position composable commerce and mock in relation to each other?
So composable is still an ideal. It's where we think the industry will go within a 3 to 5 year horizon. It's not just commerce. Composable is going to be across the whole of the digital enterprise. Commerce, the reason it's happening now in commerce is because it's a very competitive space. So we're ahead of the game. And also, in a way, we're lucky in that it's being external facing, if you like. You have a UI, you have a presentation that is public facing, and you're hooking internal things into it. So the new point of integration is almost the browser today, or it's becoming that. So that's what we call is enabling. So that decoupling, that decoupling of back ends from front ends has enabled that first step, which is the modularity of the platforms today. And then the next step is then how you compose new experiences and how you reuse all the different components behind the scenes to create new experiences. And that's what will get us to composability. So what Mac does, and I'd say Jamstack is another example, although it's a more opinionated one technically, it brings together like-minded vendors who are thinking about how to tackle these things. And at the same time that's happening, of course, the mega vendors are also thinking along these lines. So they're taking their own suites and decomposing them, and will come up with similar solutions.
Very good. So we at Commerce Tools came up with the term headless back in 2013, really started to hit the market with it back then. And to be honest, it never really caught on, right? It was a couple of years there where people were still questioning what this thing was, why they should do it. And then headless really became a thing in 2018, maybe 2019. First, I'm kind of curious when you think that it actually really took off. And second, why then? Like, why didn't this take off in 2013 or 2014 or 2015? Why did it take a few years on the market before it all kind of clicked into place?
Great question. I think, as William Gibson said, the future's already here. It's just unevenly distributed. And I was doing headless in 2010-11 before I joined Gartner as an architect practitioner. And back then, I would work for places that you couldn't buy the products they needed off the shelf. So we were building. And we were often, in order to get the agility that the business needed at the front end, having to go headless and decouple them. I've personally never used the term headless in my research. And that's why I kind of defined it in my early research, 2017, I think, at Gartner. I called it API-based or API first. And I stuck with that. But I think it just grew exponentially as it started to become, through the pressure of digitally mature organizations, ripping the heads off legacy platforms and replacing them with their own stack or a front end of another kind of front end, that headless was almost forced upon the vendors in the commerce space as an approach that their customers required. And that's become then much more accepted and started to trickle down towards the mid-tier. So it started with the larger enterprises that needed direct access of their business users to the front end and much more agility, breaking that full stack connection. And then since then, the commoditization of that and the maturity of the front end frameworks, the nodes, reacts, and views of the world that have really made that much easier to achieve is what really, I think, happened around 2018 to make it more mainstream.
Yeah, I think that explains it pretty well. So I know you haven't used the term headless yourself, but it's pretty universally hated out there as a term. Its very term is a negation of something else, and the whole headless thing is just a little bit morose. What would you have coined way back then in 2013 as a better term for headless? Because API didn't really catch on. Composable is a little bit more of a business term. Like, what would you If you had to wave a magic wand, what would you have called it?
I think Jason Wong in Gartner is the guy who came up with that more recently, multi-experience. It's a multi-experience future. It's a multi-experience now. It's not just a single front end. And in order to get to those multi-experiences that our customers are having across social, across mobile, across web, and in their smart cars, etc., the multiple experiences we need to deliver cannot be delivered with that, as I said in the talk, with that old school technology, and a radically different approach was needed to get the agility in, to enable you to have a single point of content, of experience, of commerce, but multiple delivery touch points, multi-experiences. So I think that if I'd have had that forethought back then, I'd have come up with multi-experiences, but Jason Wong at Gartner has come up with it since then.
Very good. And can you elaborate a little bit on build versus buy? We've had quite a few questions on that specific topic. When do you recommend one or the other? And I guess how do you do things in-house versus having a third-party SI?
Great question. Firstly, I think it's somewhat of a false dichotomy today. It's almost always buy and build, buy and, not buy or. I think that Compose will be a new way of doing this, which is low code, no code. So it's not really full build, but it's not just buy. And I think that we'll get to that within that 3 to 5 year horizon. Buy is all about how commoditized the capability is. Okay, how that capability will match your use case, and search and commerce and content management are various things where it's reasonably commoditized today. There's no point in reinventing that wheel. Where you build or you get an SI partner to build for you is your unique IP, and your any unique thing that you need as a business in order to deliver those experiences. And there are some cases around that, such as real-time inventory across multiple stores, where there might not be the kind of products there to do that. You might need to build some middleware to do that, for instance.
Yeah.